All right, so today we are going to do a deep dive into Flutter 3.29.1. And we're going to go beyond the typical patch notes, right? Like we want to dig in and see what developers were struggling with, how these fixes are going to impact future Flutter apps. We've got the release notes themselves, and then also a whole bunch of GitHub pull requests.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? When you first look at it, it just seems like a small update. But when you really look at it, there are 22 fixes that they packed in there. And you can really see that they were focused on smoothing out the rough edges from that previous 3.29 release.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a polishing phase. Yeah, especially when you look at all the text rendering and the impeller issues that they tackled.
Yeah, and that's a great observation, and I think it really speaks volumes about where Flutter is headed, right?
Yeah.
They're laying the groundwork for Impeller to become the default renderer, and that means that they're ironing out every little, quirk with how text displays across all these different devices.
Right, it makes sense. It's one thing to have like a fancy new renderer, but if the text looks all wonky, the whole app falls apart.
Speaking of things falling apart, you remember that issue with buttons ignoring the foreground color?
Oh yeah, pull request, hashtag 163201. That was a huge headache for developers who were trying to maintain like a consistent look and feel across their app. Imagine like you spend all this time getting your color palette perfect and then the button icons just refuse to cooperate.
Yeah, I'm looking at the before and after pictures from that pull request, and it's like night and day difference.
Yeah.
Especially for apps that use a lot of icons within buttons, this is a game changer.
It is absolutely. And it's not even just about aesthetics. Consistent theming is so crucial for accessibility and for branding. So this seemingly small tweak actually has like a ripple effect on the whole user experience.
Okay, so we've got happy designers, we've got happy users, but what about developers who are working on the bleeding edge with the latest iOS updates? I'm talking about the iOS 18.4 JIT mode crash. That had to be a major roadblock for some people. It definitely threw a wrench in the works for a few people, but thankfully the Flutter team, they provided a workaround in pull request, hashtag 164193, and they even included like a clear error message to guide developers through the issue.
Yeah, that's actually a really nice touch. Instead of leaving developers to just like scratch their heads, they provided a solution and they made it easy to understand.
Exactly. And it highlights the ongoing challenge of keeping up with these rapid-fire OS updates, right? I mean, Flutter's strength is that cross-platform compatibility, but that also means that they have to adapt to changes from Apple, Google, and everybody else.
Yeah, it's like a never-ending game of catch-up.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the price you pay for being on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that might seem small but cause huge headaches, let's talk about the engine.version issue.
Oh, yeah. Pull requests, hashtag 163672 and hashtag 163741. This one gets a little technical, but it essentially boils down to how Flutter manages the engine that's used to build your app.
Okay, I'm already feeling a little lost. Can you break this down for me?
Sure. So imagine that you're working on a specific feature branch of your app, or maybe you have a shallow clone of the Flutter repository. In certain scenarios, the engine.version was getting overridden, which messed with their ability to pull the right engine artifacts.
So even though it seemed like a tiny detail in the code, it was actually preventing some developers from building their apps correctly.
Exactly. And it just highlights how interconnected all these different parts of the Flutter development process are. Seemingly minor technical glitches can have like a ripple effect across the entire workflow.
Yet it's a good reminder that even in a polished release like this one, there's always going to be those little gremlins lurking in the code.
Absolutely. It's like a constant reminder that, software development, it's an ongoing process. There's always room for improvement. And sometimes the most valuable updates are the ones that just fix those pesky bugs and make the developer experience a little smoother.
Speaking of smooth, I noticed that platform-specific issues got some love in this release, too. There was a fix for a crash involving BackdropFilter and certain GLES drivers, right?
Yeah, that's pull request, hashtag 163581 BackdropFilter. It's a popular tool for creating, those stylish blurred background effects. So having that crash unexpectedly would definitely throw a wrench in the workflow.
Yeah, it seems like that would be especially frustrating for apps that rely heavily on those visual effects.
Absolutely. And it's not just about fixing crashes. It's also about ensuring that you have optimal performance across, a wide range of devices. Take pull request, hashtag 16366 sustain, for example. It disables Vulkan on specific Xclipse GPU drivers that were known to cause problems.
So in some cases, they're strategically choosing stability over potentially faster performance.
That's exactly right. It's about finding that sweet spot, between pushing the boundaries of what's possible and ensuring that you have a reliable experience for all users.
That makes a lot of sense. It reminds me of that iOS 18.4 JIT mode crash that we discussed earlier. Wasn't that also related to balancing performance with other factors like security?
Good catch. That's a prime example. Apple introduced a security change in iOS 18.4 that restricted JIT compilation. So the Flutter team had to come up with a workaround to maintain that balance between security and functionality for developers who needed to be able to test on physical devices running the latest iOS version.
It seems like walking that tightrope between all these competing priorities. You've got performance, security, compatibility. It's a constant challenge for the Flutter team.
It definitely keeps them on their toes, but it also highlights how vital communication and collaboration is within the Flutter community.
Hmm.
Developers need to stay informed about potential pitfalls and workarounds, and the Flutter team relies on feedback to identify and address these issues effectively.
Yeah, it's like a two-way street.
Yeah.
Everyone benefits from sharing knowledge and experiences. It's one of the things that I appreciate most about the Flutter community.
I completely agree. That collaborative spirit is a key driving force behind Flutter's continuous improvement. Even seemingly small updates like 3.29.1 contribute to a better developer experience, and ultimately it leads to higher quality Flutter apps.
So looking at the bigger picture, how do you think these fixes and improvements in 3.29.1 will shape the future of Flutter app development?
That's a fantastic question. While this specific release might not introduce, like flashy new features, it lays a really solid foundation for more exciting developments down the road. By ironing out these critical issues and really enhancing stability, they're paving the way for much more ambitious enhancements in the future.
So it's like they're doing the behind-the-scenes work now so they can really open up the throttle later on.
Exactly. And this release also sends a really clear message to developers that, the Flutter team, they're dedicated to quality and stability, even in the smallest details. They're actively listening to feedback, addressing pain points, and they're constantly striving to make the Flutter experience better for everyone.
It's exciting to see a framework that's continually evolving and empowering developers to build amazing things.
I couldn't agree more. The future of Flutter app development is bright, and releases like 3.29.1 are a testament to, the hard work, the dedication, and the collaborative spirit that really make this community so special.
Yeah, it sounds like Flutter 3.29.1 is all about those subtle improvements that make a big difference in the long run, right? So not always about, those shiny new features. Sometimes it's about refining and stabilizing the core of the framework.
Yeah, exactly. It's like maintaining a well-oiled machine. You might not always see the immediate impact of routine maintenance, but it ensures that everything keeps running smoothly and efficiently.
And when you think about it, Flutter is a pretty powerful machine, right? I mean, it's enabling developers to create these complex, visually rich apps that run seamlessly across, a whole range of devices.
Absolutely. And I think releases like this one, with its focus on these bug fixes and these stability improvements, it really demonstrates the Flutter team's commitment to providing developers with the tools they need to build those incredible experiences.
So for all the Flutter fans out there, even if you're not like racing to implement these specific fixes right away, it's worth, understanding the challenges that they address and how the Flutter team is constantly working to improve the framework.
I couldn't agree more. And as we kind of look ahead to future releases, I'd encourage everyone to think about the areas of Flutter that they'd like to see improved. Is there a particular widget that's been giving you trouble or a performance bottleneck that you'd love to see addressed?
That's a great point. Share your thoughts with the Flutter community. Your feedback plays such a vital role in shaping the future of this amazing framework.
It's a true collaborative effort, and we can all contribute to making Flutter even better.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Flutter 3.29.1. Until next time, happy fluttering.